Do you like what you see? Men don't really care about looks. It's a pretty common phrase that you might hear a lot. And most of the time we talk about beauty standards, we rightfully focus on its consequences for women. But I think it's also pretty obvious that it affects men as well. And even though I'm only focusing on men's issues, I quickly realized that I was getting myself into something bigger and darker than I initially thought. To this day, I always see myself as too skinny, especially as a man. And since I've consistently said in my previous videos that we should break free from others' expectations and be true to ourselves, I think it's only fair to confront what I'm most insecure about. How I look like. I mean, as I said, just love yourself and be confident, right? We are always playing theater. Under friends, family, or in public. We naturally and subconsciously put a mask that best fit the situation and we start to perform. Our self-presentation is generally very important to us and we try our best to control every single aspect of our performance to present our best image. But what if you can create a performance that comes closest to your ideal version of yourself, even if you have to cheat a little? I know. This is all old news. We are all aware that social media is a world where much of what we see is fake, especially when it comes to our bodies. Yet, despite this widespread knowledge, we just can't separate ourselves from this feeling that makes us so miserable.
Not to pick on my favorite people out there, the Kardashians, Kylie Jenner, that lipstick is not what gave her the lips. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
The constant comparison with other performers is an unfair game from the start. With the help of filters and now AI, realities are being created that are impossible to attain.
Filters have messed with our brains so much that people honestly think this is what they look like. This filter's insane. Like, look, it's so real.
Online, we can modify our bodies more easily than in reality. We use filters and editing to strip away our own humanity. We start to see ourselves as machines that need to be constantly updated and perfected, reaching for the unattainable. The more our online presence diverges from reality, the more likely we are to feel anxious, disappointed, and depressed.
People get really upset. You go to the gym, you look at yourself in the mirror, you're freaking jacked up, pumped, sweating, crazy lighting, looking in the mirror, and you compare yourself to that moment to when you just wake up. And that's not fair, and it causes depression in people. It makes people feel like they're small all the time, and you go down this circle, and then before you know it, you're like in this really deep hole that you can't really get out of.
And then, the moment we get off the digital stage, we suddenly feel completely exposed.
What the
Lean, ripped, six-pack, V-shape, low body fat, big arms, big chest, chiseled jaw, full hair, clear skin, tall. If you deviate from this Eurocentric beauty image, not only is your attractiveness questioned, but also your self-worth.
Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, I would be hosting in a nightclub with my top off, and that very quickly attached my sense of self-worth to the way that I looked, because I was the guy, one of the few guys that was walking about with his top off, and that meant if I was bigger or if I was leaner, then people would respect me more. And you can very quickly wrap your sense of identity and self up in your condition.
I think this shows that for many of us, if not most of us, working out has little to do with health, but much more to do with aesthetics. Beauty standards have now been rebranded as self-care. Dudes trying to achieve these looks can really lead to the absurd.
A negative canthal tilt, an incorrect ratio of my palpebral fissure before bone smashing. After bone smashing. It's literally
Literally, handsome Squidward.
This is called Lookmaxxing, originally from the insect community, but now totally mainstream. But this is a whole new rabbit hole to dive into. For young men, this is particularly important because it gives the impression that by only having this aesthetic can one succeed in relationships.
How I went from this to this in only 2 weeks. I had no jawline, a lot of acne, and a bad haircut.
Here's 3 signs that you have elite level facial attraction. Starting off with number 1 is extremely high cheekbone. Now this can be good or bad, but in most cases it's a good thing. Second trait is having extremely low set eye feature. Third thing I like to call the Giga Chad jawline.
This unstable and superficial notion is partly reinforced by, you know it, the manosphere.
If you want a girl, you're competing against other men. You're not the only man who had the idea of getting that girl. You have to be as successful as possible in all realms. You have to be as good looking, as funny, as smart, as spontaneous, as interesting, as charismatic, as rich as possible.
If a relationship is only based on looks or other external values, then they pretty much believe in cheating. If you think life is a masculinity competition all the time, the chances are obviously very high that you become insecure and live in constant fear that your partner will cheat on you. I mean, someone is always going to be richer, more ripped or whatever. This could potentially lead to toxic traits like the need to control, strong jealousy, or to resentment, envy, and self-hate, making it even harder to find someone and making you more vulnerable to get radicalized.
From that point on, the way that I felt in clothes, the way that other boys and other men looked at me, the way that other girls looked at me, I was like, oh, okay. So in order to get respect, in order to have the girls be attracted to me, in order to feel like I'm enough, I need to be big.
However, historically, we know that beauty standards changes all the time. Currently, there is some sort of antithesis to the traditional macho beauty ideal, the soft boy look. Tall, soft facial features, slim. This aesthetic is refreshing because it breaks male stereotypes and challenges expectations. It has also been strongly influenced by Korea, especially through the rise of the K-pop industry. Finally, there was an ideal I could identify with. But something was still off. Like, yeah, I'm thin, but not beautiful thin. I have soft features, but my nose is just way too big. And you can basically eat cereal out of my chest. Ultimately, the whole soft boy aesthetic is just another box you end up wanting to fit into. You still have to be fit. Ideally shredded too. So, is it really progress if we're just creating more ideals?
Standards are basically AI-generated fairy tale prints. For one, you have to be incredibly thin while at the same time having muscular toned arms. 2, you have to be painfully Caucasian. 3, you need a poreless, childlike face that's dramatically smaller than the rest of your body. And then you need unreasonably thick, wig-like hair.
Now you might think, the closer you get to your ideal version of yourself, the more you feel liberated or happier. Until you quickly realize, it's never enough.
I'm on national TV talking about, looking good and feeling good in your abs, and I was self-conscious. And I'm a professional, and I was at home being like, oh, I should have done some more sit-ups. I felt that I didn't look good.
It could always be better. And better. And better. Beauty standards have already brainwashed us too deeply by these unattainable images online or in pop culture.
And if you think that, this kind of steroid use is the thing of the past, I got bad news for you. It's probably more prevalent than ever. You go on Instagram and you got 18-year-olds looking like fucking orcs.
And I have to show the world that I'm a man. It's not enough that I am a man. I have to now prove my worth.
We've reached a point where our self-image is constantly distorted and it frankly seems irreversible.
There's always some standard of beauty that you're not meeting. Because if you're thin enough, then you don't have that ass that everybody wants. But if you have enough weight on you to have an ass, then your stomach isn't flat enough. It's all just f***ing impossible.
In specific cases, this can lead to body dysmorphia. People suffering from body dysmorphia typically feel they're not thin or muscular enough. No matter what ideal you're chasing, you don't see your body for what it truly is.
Not where you wanted to be.
Not where I wanted to be, no.
For example, men with body dysmorphia often feel an uncontrollable urge to build muscle, a drive that never seems to stop because they feel like they can never be muscular enough. They suffer from bigorexia, an obsession with muscle size.
It affects mostly men and boys who think their body build is too small and puny, that they're not big and muscular enough, when in reality they look entirely normal, or some of them are very muscular, but they don't see themselves that way.
Body dysmorphia can also lead to even more psychological issues like eating disorders or drug addiction, which in turn can lead to even more problems.
As society places increasing value on those aspects of physical appearance that can be modified through diet or exercise, whether it's body fat or muscle or some new combination thereof, we create the environment in which eating disorders can flourish.
And in the worst cases, this can completely destroy one's self-worth and ultimately.
After nearly 10 years of tough workouts and strict diets, he was still not satisfied with how he looked.
I basically got to the point where I felt like I would never be what I wanted to be, and I felt like it would be better if I wasn't here.
Maybe some of you can relate to this feeling of constantly thinking you're too skinny, especially if you happen to have a sunken chest like I do, and an eating disorder as well. While most people feel like they're too fat, I feel like the opposite. I always feel too skinny. I sometimes even freak out when I feel like I've lost some weight. And I've been trying to work out since I was 16. I'm 27 now, and the hardest part about working out has always been eating. I don't associate food with pleasure, but with torture. And I'm afraid if I work out, I lose even more weight, especially if I don't eat enough. And eating enough is very, very difficult to me. Like, extremely difficult. And this combination is just exhausting.
The issue is that therapy is not sexy, right? People are like, I'm embarrassed to do this thing, but I think therapy is cool as fun. Yeah. To be able to sit down and talk about your problems, talk about your shit with somebody, and just unpack some stuff, because you don't really realize if you go through something how far you can push something down inside you, and you feel like you've processed it, but you actually haven't.
Men kind of have this like stigma. If they say like, oh yeah, like I'm insecure about like the way I look, like if they speak out, there's kind of this like, oh yeah, you're not a man, you know? Yeah, seems to be weak.
Through my years of therapy, I've slowly learned where my obsession with looks and fear of judgment comes from, and I've begun to understand and reflect more on myself. This is how I gradually freed myself from the constant pressure of comparison. Start looking inward, not outward, is easier said than done. It is a long, exhausting, and vulnerable process. We're all suffering from beauty standards, so talk about it. Talk to your therapist about it if you can, and how it affects you. Because frankly, the constant pressure of beauty expectations are just getting worse.